Okay. Hello, lovely allies. We've got a little middle school learning presentation for you. So we'll first go through a bit of the theory of why and what we do, and then we'll go on to the practical side so that you've actually got some real life practical things that you can use in the classroom. So if we pop into our first little exploration.
There you go.
Okay. Throughout the last year and a half, the middle school team has been coming up with a definition of exactly what we are doing in the middle school with our old curriculum. So our aim and what we want and what we've been practicing doing is providing hands-on opportunities with a range of experiences to provoke curiosity, broaden and respond to interests and needs to raise their awareness of the world around them, while developing skills and independence. So there's a lot going on, which is why as we go along, you'll see why we integrate everything together. So in our exploration learning, everything connects to a bigger idea. So it's all based off an idea that we want them to know. So we come up with those, and if we pop into our integrated curriculum areas, little circles, you'll see there's a little diagram here. Everything we do interconnects, so it's not just standalone. So you'll see that we've got our learning areas, but we also have our key competencies like relating to others, using language, symbols and text, thinking, managing self, and participating and contributing. And I'd just like to make a note that you'll hear in Brent's presentation more about skills as well, and rather than tell you a whole lot of information, what he explains, it applies to us as well. All right. What we do, we like to make it relevant to our learners. So we really like, whenever we're planning a unit, we want to make sure that we consider where they've come from and where they're heading. So we have got the juniors who have got this amazing play-based learning they're doing, seniors doing project-based. So we're in the middle, and we need to be conscious, so we are conscious of the skills that they need to keep developing, taking from where they've come from, where they need to go and what they need. And we're quite fortunate that we can draw on putting some play-based in there, we can put on project-based and problem-based, and we can mix it up for them to give them those skills as well.
And also their needs of right now. So developmental levels of the students, until they're 7, play-based learning is the best form of learning for them. And then from 7 onwards, they are developmentally able to have better fine motor skills and be more able to, in their thinking, work with academic skills and slightly abstract concepts and things like that. So they are ready for this kind of learning here and developing the skills to be lifelong learners. So they're learning a little bit more consciously about the processes that learning has.
And we've just got a little reminder circle there that everything we do requires exploration and discovery, because that's really going to entice them in.
It was something you noticed about your students. Do you remember, Janice, when you started designing this exploration, when you started calling it exploration learning, that your students were really engaged with hands-on and bigger ways of finding out information than standalone things?
Yeah, more real-life connections as well, meaningful for them. How we got here. So the first circle is a little bit more about New Zealand and its curriculum as a whole. So if we pop into number 1, and Alana will jump in if I miss anything. Obviously, we went from a national standards situation where it really focused on reading, writing, and maths, and it gave us things we pretty much almost began to have to start teaching to the test again because there were things we had to meet. But then we've had that whole change where it's not there anymore. So we know that it's all interconnected and it just can't be standalone. And we wanted to make sure that learning was more meaningful at our school, helping them make connections between what they're learning and the real world. Being responsive to the needs, identities, languages, cultures, interests, strengths, and aspirations of our learners and their families. We've done so much work on our culturally responsive practice that we wanted it to reflect that. So all of our values, we were actually pretty much walking the talk. So that's the bigger picture.
And the New Zealand curriculum is a really rich framework. It's kind of world renowned. Since national standards is no longer there, we can actually really use the New Zealand curriculum how it was meant to be used, and develop our localized curriculum, which is what we've spent a lot of time doing.
And probably important to note in now that so with the middle team being new, and then seeing what we've bought from other teams as well, we were actually able to take that and build our own localized curriculum that worked for our age group based on research. All right. So I'll let Alana speak a little bit more to this, but obviously this is kind of what we make sure we have in there, like, you know, with our values and our principles, and we've kind of mentioned that as well. But also having, and was it screen splitting? What did you call that, Alana?
Screen teaching. Yeah.
Split screen teaching. So we have our content and what they're learning about, but we also have skills that they're focusing on at the same time. So we don't want to drop one without the other. And when we're planning, we make sure that we really look at it and go, what skills do our kids need? What can we build into this to make sure that they're constantly having to practice those skills and develop them? And how can we explicitly teach them in a purposeful way as well?
So you'll see down the bottom, it's got reflecting on what we've learned as well as how we've learned. Did you want to talk about something in particular, Janice?
I think even if it's as simple as when they're first coming into the room, they don't know how to log onto a computer. We're logging onto a computer to maybe find out some information about a topic. However, the skills I've just used are, I've just logged onto a computer, I've learned how to use that piece of technology. So that's just a little simple example of that as well. Yeah.
In there as well, it's talking about collaboration with a group. So the group work would have some sort of knowledge that they're trying to find out together, or a product that they're trying to work together on. And so that's an important piece of the learning. But also we're looking at what made our group successful today, or in the class, we're saying, your group worked really well today. What were you doing that was different from us? So what can I learn? So on my journey to become a better collaborator, I'm picking up and I'm learning from others, and we're also reflecting on what was great and what we can work on for next time. So the skill and the content are happening at the same time.
All right, and popping into number 3. So this is how our learners are doing. So this is what we saw once we actually put this in to practice. The exploration hooked them in. They were excited, their engagement made them want to do it in their own time. So we had parents messaging us and emailing us. They were actually moving up reading, writing and maths groups without the old fashioned just doing, rotation, still doing the practicing of the skills and the explicit teaching, but there was more moving up.
I noticed, Janice, in your teams, you didn't have, reading wasn't always at the same time and the same level. So you didn't have, you were worried at some point in reflection about having the mixed level groupings, but actually they were still making huge progress, even though you weren't teaching the whole group at the same time, at the same level.
We noticed that, so generally what has happened in the past, and I'm guilty of it, is you think, oh no, I've got my little magenta readers, they won't be able to read this topic book. So you tend to give them something a bit more simpler, or you just do something else with them, where we started buddying them up so that we had mixed levels and they were learning from each other. So even our little magenta readers were learning about the contents page and the glossaries. They knew the concept of the text, they just couldn't always read it, but they had a buddy for that. So they learned a lot more than what they would have if we'd done the groupings like we normally would. Yeah.
Also, they had that motivation because it was so meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely.
They had to learn this information, and this is one of the ways they were learning. So they wanted to read it. Yeah. Yeah.
And we started noticing a little bit more initiative and independence. Them getting more involved in their assessments, so being able to say what they can do well and even verbalise a bit more about what their next steps are. And reflecting, they're becoming a lot more able to reflect and realising that it's okay to have something to work on, which is quite good. All right. pop into how it works. If we pop into our natural learning process, so we base it off, and you would have heard this word before, the inquiry cycle. And it's what, when we're planning, we take it into account, and we try and make it that we're planning in that way as well. But I'm going to leave Alana to have a little chat about this one, and I'll just bob in with any of your life examples if Alana needs it.
Okay, so this is called a natural learning process, and at some point during learning anything, even as adults, we go through these phases, and sometimes we go through all of them in one situation, and sometimes we spend longer in the different phases and go backwards and forwards. So we're just going to introduce you to these phases. Down the side you can see them, but the students wouldn't have to know this specifically, but they should be becoming more aware of what's happening as they're learning. So the teachers, it's really important for us to tune into the learners, and that happens in a more focused way at the start of a unit or at the start of an inquiry or exploration. But we also dip in and out of it every time we work with learners, because it's kind of like saying formative assessment. We're saying, what is this child thinking? Where are they up to? Or what can they do? And what do they need to do next? And then exploration learning, it's also based on that socio-constructive theory of learning. It's not so much theory now because we've got a lot of neuroscience, but learners build upon what they already know and understand. So upon their prior knowledge or prior experiences or prior conceptions, and sometimes misconceptions of what they already know, they construct meaning on top of that. So we're always needing to know, where are they starting from? What's their current understanding of something, so they can build on top of it. And we also have that social interactions part. So I know that in your forum you've been talking about students who need to work alone, and all of us need to have time to think about things. Some of us do this through talking, but all of us need that time. It could be thinking alone time, where we need to have the space to think and reflect on things, develop ideas, but we actually construct information in a social interaction afterwards or before, or come back to it. So we need to have opportunities at the same time to have time alone to think and time together to build on our ideas. We actually can go further with our combined ideas. And if you think about design or a collaborative planning session, when we plan as teachers, of course we can plan alone and we can get it done, but when we come together we create something that we might not have even thought of by ourselves. And that's kind of an example of how we learn through social interactions. What we're going to do now is just have a look at these pieces of a learning process. It's not everything, but these are sort of some common language that you might hear if you go into classrooms or even see on the walls sometimes.
We're popping into tuning in. So obviously we talked about that, wanting to know what they're bringing with them, what skills do they already have, are they curious, how do they feel about this? And we think about what we can do to provoke them to activate their prior knowledge and their heart for it, and to be able to gather information to see exactly where they're at. So we use this, and whenever we encounter something new, we dip back into this to kind of figure out, what do they know? Are they actually into it? Is there any point pursuing this? And so that's what we do. We pop into this to first get into that topic.
You talked about problem-based learning, and that is all about activating their heart. So it's wanting them to have a emotional response to what they're learning, and it might be outrage, or it might be like, wow, fascination, or it could be oh, how could I use that? So it's kind of getting an emotional response. As soon as you activate their heart, then you activate their wanting to learn about something. So it's great for motivation. And I think it's also connected to relationships, which is a big part of our learning community inside our classroom as well.
We go to our next one, finding out. So this is the phase where we are throwing lots of amazing fun stuff at them that they can find out and explore and do it. As scientists, we would use all of our senses, so it's not just one way, it's using everything and being real scientists. And they love that when we call them little scientists, so that's always fun.
So we're using a range of resources
and
as well. It's not just text and media.
Yeah, and if you were one of the lucky ones to come on our Rotorua trip, that was all part of that as well, that whole finding out as well.
And that trip, you had lots of different ways of finding out too. They observed, they experienced it, they used all of their senses, their smell and their touch and their being in that environment, and then they interviewed people and they listened to experts as well. So it was a really rich range of ways of finding out at that one trip.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool.
This is probably the one that they'd hear the most, wouldn't they, in your classrooms when you're talking with kids? Like, how did you find out about this, or what did you discover? You know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is when a lot of the language and stuff will come into play as well. But we'll talk about that soon. Don't worry.
Yes, very good.
The sorting out phase. So this is also a good way for them to figure out exactly what they found out, and they can chunk it together, and like it says here, like analyze, make connections, find patterns, and there's just a couple of examples in the coloured writing there of the types of things that might help them do that.
These are things that the classes have done in the same trip that you were talking about, actually, connected to that same exploration. But it could even just be discussion time, small group discussion, where they're sorting out, what did you learn about this, or what did you think that meant? And it's just a phase of learning. It doesn't necessarily have to be a product. It's a making sense of what we found out, or trying to put it together in a way that helps us make sense of it.
Going further, so this is where they might have come up with new questions or new curiosities through finding out about the original thing that was thrown at them. So we went from looking at the different landforms over in Rotorua, and then they wanted to start looking at other famous landforms or the ones in the Waikato. What's special about those landforms, why were they special to other people? So that kind of branches off. So this is when we might see a bit more individual or group work happening, and depending on the time of the year, sometimes the beginning of the year it's very class guided and it's the whole class going that way. But as they start to get better at it, we guide them in different ways. And it depends on class to class too, and how their class is made up, how it works.
We sometimes start exploring in a different context. So we're thinking about maybe Rotorua's community, and then we might think about the world, what's some famous landmarks, and we might think about self, like, oh, this is in my backyard, what's that mean? Or I was in an earthquake once and this is how it felt, you know, and we're sort of going from self to local to global and making a transferable connection with that big understanding, that concept that we talked about at the start. So what we're trying to learn about shouldn't be just related to one position, it should be transferable so we can connect to it throughout the rest of our lives.
Our last little one is reflection as well. And this is something that we're developing a lot more in action as well. And that we're reflecting on what we've learned. If there's anything we still need to know, what can I do with this? And how could I share this information? It doesn't always have to be that it's a big, massive poster, or it could just be that they feel like they've changed their own thinking, and that could be the reflection in action, is they've changed their thinking and now they're going to do things differently. So that can look different for all children as well. And it's one part, because that could be they get to there, then they chunk back to the start and tune in to find out something else that they've decided that they need to go and do, but they need to have the skills to go and do it. For example, a poster. So they might say, I'm going to put this in a poster, but now I'm going to have to go back into the finding out phase so that I can find out how would I set out a poster to present this information. And so as you can see, it's like all over the place.
In the project-based learning, they have 3 distinct cycles that sort of go through the same process. And after 3 weeks, when they make their first product or finish their first project, this is where they go here. And then they sort of almost cycle through the stages, although it's not a cycle, it's in and out of phases. So the next 3 weeks, they create another project based on what they've learned. In Janice's class, this might be weekly, or it might be even within 1 day. So it doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out process. It might be at the end of a lesson. The other thing is that it doesn't have to necessarily be about content. Like Janice was saying, it can be about skills as well. So it might be collaboration. What have I learned from this session with my group? What helped us learn best as a group today? What behaviours did we do? And what am I going to do for next time? So that's reflecting and taking action to improve my group work just from that one lesson.
The timetable part that we're going to pop into is going to give you more of a practical idea as well of what you'll see in the classroom. So we're hoping when you walk into our classes, kids will be engaged. They should hopefully be able to explain what they're doing and maybe the why they're doing it. We want to know that they're getting better at that. So that's a bit of our goal. You'll see a range of whole class, individual or group exploration experiences. So that'll be different times depending on the classes as well. And you'll see a mix of hands-on exploring, verbal, written learning, so that the same idea is presented in lots of different ways for different needs. And so then across all of the different contexts, all of those ideas and understandings are transferred over, and even the skills as well. And within the daily schedule, you'll notice that each teacher is different. So we do structure and schedule in maths and literacy into the day, but a lot of the day is based on the big concepts. So reading and writing is often a lot of the time connected, but we all know that there are those children who need that reading mileage and they need that skill. So you'll also see children who really need to read every day, and it may not be that they are having the topics there and it's not connected, but it will be that they've chosen their books and they're choosing what they're reading, so then they've got that power over their learning as well. You'll notice that we don't go, oh, we're going to write reports for this term or narratives for this term. The skills are developed as we explore a topic, so it might be that it's appropriate to write a letter to somebody, or somebody comes up with a cool idea about writing about one of the plants in the gully and it turns into a narrative. So it's all to do with, so it's purposeful, but then there is the skills that are happening as well. And a lot of the time in the classes, it starts with the exploration so that the literacy can piggyback off that. And you'll also be aware that in the middle school, we do have some beginning teachers. So in their classes, it may be more structured because they're still learning to, like, with their programs and refining those. And then as the years go by, it might change a little bit as well. So those are the main things you should be seeing in the middle school.
I think it's important as well, Janice, to acknowledge that especially in the middle school ages, routine's still really important. So you're very flexible, but there are things that make learning easier for students that you put in as routines within your classroom. Whereas in other parts of the school, it might be less routine based at times. So it depends on the teacher, but also a schedule or routine helps the students to feel comfortable and know what to do when they come into the classroom.
All right, if we head into learning within the term, so at the beginning of the term, I just wanted to point out that you'll notice that particularly at the beginning when there's a new topic, it'll be a lot more teacher directed and explicit teaching, and particularly at the beginning of the year with the new, year threes coming in. But there's always opportunities for choice. Towards the end of the term, we're hoping that the students are leading it a bit more. And if we've done our job properly, they'll be questioning more, and there'll be more, still opportunities for student choice, but it'll be the interest coming through a bit more with that, under that big idea as well.
So at the start of the term, Janice, you talked about vocabulary development and explicit teaching of skills. I think also the key competencies can be taught explicitly. So if you know that you are going to be interviewing, You would teach the skills of how to interview or how to ask questions that give the information that you need. If you were doing something in a peer, you might talk about roles and responsibilities. So who's going to gather equipment, how will we share our jobs, those sorts of things would be explicitly taught. Some of the learning assistants in the forum were talking about how students are still having issues in the older years at collaborating, and this is something that we will always explicitly have times of teaching, but it's a journey. It's not an instant, we did a lesson on collaboration and now everyone should be able to do it, or children will just learn how to collaborate if we just keep putting them together. It's something that we keep returning to and explicitly drawing attention to. In the middle years, it's maybe the first time that they explicitly thought about this as a situation or a skill that they have control over, that's not just based on the situation, but there's actually patterns of behaviours that they can learn and that we're bringing to their attention and that they're practicing and reflecting on at the end of a session. Before middle school, we probably didn't do it to the same degree because they weren't quite ready, they weren't reflective and able to see perspective.
Cool. All right, now I bet you guys are loving listening. See my face and Alana's face this whole time. Okay. Well, this is just a little short bubble, but if we just pop into an example, so we had the big understanding, and then we break it into what we want them to know and what we want them to understand, and then from this we come up with a whole lot of different ideas. So for example, if we want them to know that different parts of the plant have different functions, we also want them to understand that plants have special structures that contribute to their reproductive success, so flowers, fruits and seed, and they help them survive. So with that in mind, we will pop into the next little one of have a go. So if we're thinking of tuning in and developing questions, these are some of the things that we thought of for tuning them in. And once I've said this, I'm going to get you to pause the video and have a little tune yourself. So like something like a true or false quiz, a wonder and wander, box of books, questions from students, teacher planted questions to prompt deeper thinking.
Something you noticed, Janice, at the start of the year, maybe last year when we couldn't get the computers out quickly, but you noticed that your students actually really benefited from book time, right? So
yeah. And it became a thing then at the beginning of our units. We didn't use technology because they really engaged in that. And visual observations, blindfold and identify your tree from how it felt.
So these are some tuning in activities that they did within their classrooms, and you found out a lot about what the students already knew, and they started getting curious and starting to activate what they already knew about plants and things from these experiences. What we'd like you to do next is say, if you'd found out the stuff with your learners and you had that big understanding, so we'll go here to your turn, that big understanding about what plants are and what they need to survive and thrive, the parts of plants as well. What are some ideas that you have that are hands-on, meaningful ways to find out about this that would suit your learners that you work with within your day? So if you can just pause after this and have a little think and a brainstorm and think about your learner, what would they really get engaged in that would help them find out about plants and what they need to survive and thrive?
You're so fortunate as well because you get that benefit of one-on-one or with that group, where often we're catering for a whole class that have such diverse needs. So think about the children that you actually work with in your class. Cool. It's a good time to pause.
Okay, we're back. These are something that the teachers came up with. This picture over here is literally what the teachers did to brainstorm, just like you have had a chance to do, and just have a think about how we could find out about our kids. This says tuning in, and this says finding out, and how the students could find out about their ideas that we had as our big ideas.
and we'll just let you have a little read of it because I'm sure you're just sick of our voices. Feel free to pause it if you need to, because we might move on in a few seconds.
Yeah, we'll move on.
Okay, and this last little circle is how can you help? Now, obviously, while we've been talking, you've probably had a lot of thoughts already and you've made notes and you're thinking about the children that you work with. But in the middle school, we definitely, if you're in our classes, we need your support with all kids, but particularly ELL, helping with that vocabulary understanding. So the importance in that is, and I know that you probably already are very aware of it, if they don't know what words mean, then they are not going to engage and they are going to be so lost. So having that help, understanding those words, and I know that that will also be a responsibility for us as a team to make sure you have that planning, you know exactly where we're going, and have those wall displays up for you. And then another thing is also helping them understand the big ideas by maybe reproducing what's happened in the class. So for example, if they've planted a bean seed, then maybe they could plant a different type of seed, like a sunflower seed, and go through the same process with the same language. So that really helps them. Well, we have obviously a goal for them to be independent and to be able to start exploring a bit more by themselves and questioning. Now, we've written there, have the permission to jump in. Hopefully you feel like that in the middle school. We want you to jump in, not just in the content, but if you're noticing that maybe there's a group that might need to just sit down and have a chat with an adult about what's not working, what can we do to make this work better. We want you to do that. We want you to jump in to help with the skills. And it doesn't matter if that group doesn't finish on that day a task, because it's not about the product, it's about the learning that goes on, the skills, and what they've learned along the way. So we just wanted to make sure that we said that so that you jump in. It'll be great. Also preparing and sharing resources. So now I say that not as an expectation, but as that you are also resourceful, and I know that you can walk into a class and see what people are doing, and automatically you've probably got your brain ticking about a resource you know about or a book you know about. We would love you to share that with us, because that would be super helpful. And even when we're planning, we can share with you the big idea and what we want them to know. And then if you've got resources, please do share them with us. We would really love it. Wall displays with a question mark. Now that's because I just wanted to let you know that this term, our team, I can't remember if I've already mentioned it, we're hoping to have everything up on the wall so you can walk in and see the big idea, the learning journey we've been on. So that gives you a bit more of an idea. And if it floods your boat to do wall displays, talk to your classroom teacher, because we would love that help.
The big idea might be a question on the wall, mightn't it? Like, we don't always put the idea, we might put a sort of a driving question where they explore the idea through that question.
So being able to break out the learning into smaller chunks. So in real life, for example, you might be working with a child that cannot sit through a whole session. It's just going to be too much for them. They might be able to do the first part and get the learning. And it might be that we're, as a class, we're going through the steps to plant a seed. And then we're going to brainstorm together the steps we took so that we can then draft a little bit of an instruction piece of paper about how someone else could do that. However, for some children, that's far too much. And so it's seeing what has been done with the whole class throughout the week. It might be breaking it up into manageable 10 to 15 minute chunks where you help them, guide them through, and whatever resource like thing they're using. It might be on the iPad with the book creator. It could be that you write a sentence for them and help them brainstorm when they write. It just depends where they're at. So that's a real life example. What we really want you to know as well is that it's a partnership between you and us. So you're working with the child as well, and sometimes you might see things that we've missed, and so we can talk and communicate and make decisions for what's going to work best for them together. That's really what we want to do, work alongside each other.
Yeah, and you really know how the students work best, so you can bring a lot to offer to that conversation as well. But also, you don't have to do it by yourself. It's not your job to come in and just work out what the best way to teach them is. You can talk with the classroom teacher and say, I don't think they really understood that, this idea, or the classroom teacher would say, well, this is actually the important part. how can we get to that point, or you could try this with them?
It could also be that you're working with a group of learners. So, for example, in another class in the middle school, there might be a group of children that you know either independently can't work by themselves to get a task done, or they don't have the skills or the language to be able to complete a task. So it might be that you work with a small group, or you work with the rest of the class and they come to you while the teacher gets to have that one-on-one focus with it. So that would be really helpful, and that's in every area in what we're doing.
We talked about, Janice, how the process, and I think all of the other teachers as well, Louise and Brent, have talked about how the process is the important learning part. It's not just trying to get the learners to finish the product. The process for them is actually really, really important to develop the skills or to construct understanding. So no matter what the product is, there'll be a reason for doing it that helps them understand their thinking better, or helps them find out something, or helps develop a skill. So we're not rushing through the process trying to finish the product. The product's not the main thing. That's not our main goal. It'll be the learning that's happening during the development of that activity.
There also, it could be that we might have had children away, and so we might say, oh, please, can you work with these children? Because it might have been the day before we've done the really important thing, like planting a seed and going through that process. And there's no point asking that child to write instructions on how to plant a seed if they haven't hands-on experienced it. So that could be something else that we could ask you to do. There's also the skills base, so it might be that when you come into our class, there might be a few children that we say, please, for mileage and skills, could you read with these kids, or could you please play these maths games with them to help them with their basic facts. So there's all the skill-based stuff as well, or even is it okay if you take a group of these children out and play a game where they're practicing a social skill or sharing or something like that as well. But the classroom teacher is expected to tell you exactly what skill to focus on, so it's not up to you to do the planning. Also share what you notice. You notice things that we might not, so bringing issues and challenges that the children might be having, either like the skills, understanding with the group they're working on, and it's really valuable, and we want you to tell us about your wonderings. And I know a lot of you do that already, and hopefully you feel welcome in our middle school classes to do that. So please do. It's a partnership with you, and we really appreciate your work. And if you have any questions, just talk to us in the middle school.
That one might be the most important part, because your eyes and your close working with groups gives you so much knowledge of how that group is thinking, or how they're working together, or what they're actually doing. So yeah, just highlighting that, sharing what you've noticed. This group really isn't working well. They've got this child who's not doing anything and this child who's doing everything. That's really important information for the teacher. If they're working with two or three other groups that day, then the next day they can plan to work more closely with a group, or they can give you some things that you could do to help that group get back on track, or reflect on how that group was working, so the children can actually work out what they need to do next. It's crucial information, and you play a really crucial role in that.
Yeah. Cool. And to end off, thank you for everything that you do. We appreciate you, and we appreciate you sitting watching these as well.
Yes, huge appreciative.